Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Bruce train, though I'm sure he will come up, as he often does. I have a fellow podcaster, speaker, coach. My new friend Julie is joining me, and we just had a fun discussion about cursing on podcasts and how we try not to do it, but sometimes it slips out. How you doing,
Yep,
Julie?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm coming to you from California. I live in Bakersfield, which is about 2 hours north of Los Angeles. I was born and raised here, and my husband was too. So this is where our roots are. Someday we'll live somewhere not so hot. Before COVID, I worked in higher education. I taught psychology and statistics, and I did assessment and research and all these fancy reporting things. But post COVID, it really gave me a space to decide what I really wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I started my own coaching business. And in the first year or so, I took a lot of classes, and one of those classes was on podcasting. And I did it for several months and I planned for several more months and nothing ever happened because I was doing career coaching at the time, which is fine. I always do it, but I wasn't excited about it. So I said, you know what? Let's just try this out for something I love to talk about. And that's when I started a podcast about pets. And that is when I realized, which I'm sure you have with your podcast niche, is podcasting is about your passion. It's about things you love and want to share with others or connect with others about. And that is what pets allowed me to do, to start podcasting and realizing I enjoyed it. Put the first episodes out. They weren't edited, nothing. They were probably awful sound quality. I don't even remember. But people listened, people reached out and wanted to be on. And that is where the story of my pet was born. And over 3 years later, we're still going. We're a top 5% podcast. We're not huge. We don't have big numbers, but I'm really using it to make a difference, advocating and educating for people to understand more about animal rescue and how they can help animals in their own community. And then I loved it so much, I went full born into podcasting. So now I help other women start their own or become awesome guests.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, when I get, because I do get people asking me for advice and about podcasting, and I say, first off, make sure it's a topic that is broad enough to support long term, unless you specifically are just wanting to do a limited series. That's fine. Two, work, do pick a topic that you're going to want to talk about, even if no one listens, because you'll have fun. And three, just do it. Don't worry about
Yep.
quality. Don't worry about it because the first few episodes are going to suck because you don't know what you're doing. The other thing is have three or four in the bank because
Yes.
life will happen and you'll end up and you want to try to have a consistent, whether it's you're doing weekly, whether you're bi-weekly, whether you're once a month, whatever it is, you want to teach your listeners to do that. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
all of those things are so important. And I think when I first decided to focus all on podcasting, I assumed everyone was like me and wanted to just start. But I
Yeah.
realized quickly that a lot of the people I was meeting in networking and business areas, some had never gone into podcasting at all.
Yeah.
So I realized there's a much wider area. So now I focus more on helping women share their stories in podcasting, whatever that looks like, whether it's as a guest or a host or
Yeah.
both or live streams or whatever, because it's different for everybody. But that's what I love about podcasting because there's so many opportunities. You get to decide what it is for you. You get to decide what your topic is, your format is, your length, how much. Like people can do it once a month if they want to. People can do 5 minutes every day. Like there are no podcasting police. You get to decide what it is, but so true. Decide what it is and make it something you know you can keep up. Don't put over real unrealistic expectations on yourself because that's why so many pod fade in that first 10 episodes of a new podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk more about podcasting. We're going to talk more about pets, but I do want to start at the beginning. So,
Yes.
and this, since this is a music themed podcast, though we won't just talk music, talk about where you mentioned growing up there in California. Talk about what kind of music were your family listening to?
So I was probably a little atypical than most people my age
Yeah.
because my parents were older. My dad was 54 when I was born, and my mom was 32. So they also had a big age difference. So because of that, which I'm very grateful now because it helped me learn appreciate all types of music. So in our household, my dad listened to big band music. Like that's what was on the radio when we traveled places for vacation or to visit family. So I love that music, and it's actually I had a live band playing that kind of music at my wedding.
How
I love
fun.
it. I've seen the Miller story documentary or movie they made too many times to count. But he also loved country, like the old style country. Here in Bakersfield, we have a lot of country music history. I'm not a
Buck
huge country music fan myself, but
Buck
I know it.
Owens, Dwight
Buck
Yoakam. Yeah,
Owens,
absolutely.
Merle
Yes.
Haggard. Yep.
Yes.
And my dad, obviously being older, he was very connected to a lot of those peoples because he was growing up the same time they were, right?
Yeah.
They were all in the same age. But also we were encouraged to be musical. I played an instrument starting in 4th grade. I was in band. I played a clarinet, a saxophone, and then in high school I played a bassoon. So I've played all sorts of music from that perspective. My sister was very musical, ended up going to college for music. And
Oh, how
so
fun.
through her, I heard a lot of classical opera as well as all the musicals. So between all of that, I grew up with a lot of different kinds, but I also loved just listening to music. So growing up, I had my own radio, my own CD player, whatever at the time. And I love pop, I love R&B. I was into grunge because that's when I was in high school. So for me, I'm very, now that I'm here and can look back, I'm very grateful that I got to experience a lot of different types of music and be a musician and learn how to read music and learn how to play. We took piano from the time I was about 5. And so even though I don't play anything anymore and haven't in years, it's still, I love that. Those were great experiences to get to be on stage, but also to get to travel and do things. So I've, music has always been a big part of my life.
In the, I often find, and this is a general statement, but if you do enough episodes, you start seeing patterns. And one
Yep.
of the patterns I see, Julie, is that in general, two types of people: the people that enjoyed their parents' music, embraced it, and then as they became a teenager or college, they expanded their horizon. And then the others that couldn't stand their parents' music, just it was a rebel. And then when they're 30, I always joke that Johnny Cash guy dad liked, he's pretty good.
Yep.
Little did I know. So it sounds like you were the first.
Yeah, and it wasn't that I like when they played their music, I didn't like it. I just
Yeah.
love music. So for me, it there wasn't a question. When we were going on car trips, my dad controlled the radio. That's just what happened. And
Yes.
so we
Yeah.
listened to that music and we enjoyed it. We learned to enjoy it. But also, my family, we grew up with TVs. We grew up on TV trays. And in teenagehood, I had my own TV in my room. So I
Yeah.
also grew up on MTV. So I got to see a vast difference in all the different types of music because they had all different types of music. And so for me, it was just an integral part of every day because I loved watching it. I loved listening. And I was one of those kids. I loved school. I was good at school, but I always had to have something else going on, whether I was listening to music or watching TV. So I've always been a person that does it as a part of whatever else I'm doing. I never felt like my parents were like, "Oh no, you can't play that music." They never did that. They never checked what records or CDs I was buying. In some ways I was very allowed to experiment and hear different things and learn different things. So, I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for that.
Do you have favorite musicians now?
I was thinking about this. This is a hard one. I'm 47. I was like, there's definitely been different ones at different times, but I
Sure.
do have a great first concert story for
Oh,
you.
please. That sounds
So
great.
when I was very little, my parents and some of their friends, they co-owned a small beach house over on the central California coast and in a little sleepy town that is not sleepy anymore called Morro Bay. And so we went there a lot for weekends or summer trips. And we had an 8-track in that. And one of the 8 tracks we had that we played a lot was Kenny Rogers' Gambler album.
Okay, sounds good.
Which I can still sing every word to that song. And so over near there, there's this what they call the Mid-State Fair in California that happens every summer, still happens, and they always have a lot of concerts. I think I was around 5, give or take. We went to the Mid-State Fair and we got to see Kenny Rogers in concert. And
Nice.
he even brought Dolly Parton out for one of their duets.
Oh, how
And so
fun.
yeah. So that was something, it was like, oh, I have images, visual images that will pop up when I think about it. Like I remember standing in the dirt, all of that. And I've even recently asked my mom, did that happen or did I make that? So that was really cool because at a very young age, I got to experience the live music aspect of things.
Yeah.
And that continued a lot, not only as a performer, we traveled a lot because my sister was in choir and band and jazz band and all the things. So sometimes it was me going with my parents to see her concerts or her musicals. So it definitely, I loved going through kind of the questions you gave me because it really made me get to think back of all the amazing experience that I had in the music area.
Yeah. You mentioned you were in academia before COVID. What did
Hmm.
you always know you wanted to be a teacher?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I went to college thinking I wanted to be a doctor of some kind. And then I took Psych 101 and realized, oh, there's biopsychology. So I could do it in there. And so that kind of started it. But it was actually some teachers I had in college that saw things in me I didn't realize I had or were natural to who I am as a person. And so they helped me realize it and pull out the fact that I'm a good facilitator, I'm a good listener, I'm a good person to lead a group. But I also, while I was in college, I had a part time job where I got to go back to my high school
Mhm.
and sit in classrooms and be a tutor so that when they were working, I would walk around with the teacher and help them. And so I think that had a big part of it that I realized that I was really good at helping people with subjects they don't like.
Okay.
Algebra, and then also in college, I realized that I love statistics and I was good at it. So I actually was a teacher assistant in those classes right after I took them. So it was little things around that I realized I had that skill. I'm an introvert. I've always been what people would call shy or quiet, but it was more of I have to be comfortable before like I really show myself. And so I would say it was through those opportunities and experiences and also having some really amazing teachers that I realized, oh, I can help other people learn the things that I've learned. And yeah, so I love teaching stats because it's a very transformational thing to see a bunch of people come into a room on the first night and be so anxious and uncertain and not want to do it. And then I can lead them through it step by step to it's okay, we're going to start at the beginning and get there. So yeah, so I think through experience and I realized, okay, people really respond to me as a teacher. And it's funny now, I do miss teaching those topics because I did love them in different ways, but I still get to be a teacher. I get on Zoom with someone and I help them edit or launch their podcast or create a host or be a get whatever. So I still get to teach. It's just in a different way. And I love podcasting because there's always something new. So I also get to still be a student too.
What were there any specific, and I hate to use the word tricks, but any tools, I think is a better word, to that you were able to help someone pick up on a subject they necessarily were either afraid of or didn't want to learn? That
Mm.
that were there, what were some of the tools you used to do that, if you don't mind?
Yeah. One of the things I learned is one of the really important things I learned was when you ask a question, if you're standing in front of one person or 30 people, whatever, and you say, okay, how would you do this? Or what's next? Or what's the next step? I realize that people never get enough time for people to answer because we don't process like that. That's not human brains don't work
Yeah.
that fast. So if I say, so how did what did you put button did you push next? If I just went right into the next one, they don't have time to actually even think about it, let alone answer. So some of it for me was forcing myself to slow down and put a sentence, an idea, a step out and allow people to process it and then move to the next, right? So a lot of it for me was even just not so much the content, but the way I presented it. And when I first taught my first class at a community college when I was in grad school, I had overhead projector and slides with big sentences and all this info because it was like I just have to tell them everything. But so it was a journey for me to realize how to teach and how to teach that a way that's engaging and that keeps people interested. And now teaching is very different. It's very active and it's very
Yeah.
interactive and all of that. So it was a struggle for me because I was a good student, so I could learn anyway, really. But
Yeah.
I realized through experience that people don't all always learn the way I do.
Sure.
A lot of that for me were just the tools of realizing there's different learning styles and I want to do different things. I'm a visual person, so when I would study, I would write out my notes, and then when I'm taking the test, I could visualize the notes in my head. That's just how my brain works. But I didn't realize that wasn't how everybody else worked.
Yeah.
So, as someone in psychology, I think it was great because not only did I get to learn how to be a teacher, but I learned about how people learn. I learned about
Yeah.
how people are different and how anxiety and failure and all those things impact how well we learn something that we think, "Oh, I'll never know how to do that." And an example of that I can give is my husband. He's a carpenter.
Okay.
He never went to college, and one of the reasons he didn't go was he said, I'd never wanted to have to take math again because he hated it. And I'm
Sure.
like, you do math every
All
day.
the time. Yes.
But he
Right?
understands that because it's applicable, it's applied to something he's creating or building.
Yes.
So that was a lot of what I had to learn really is to how to reach different type of learners and how to keep people engaged. I think that's the same thing with podcasting, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to just keep talking because people are going to lose interest. So I've realized a lot of those skills I gained as a teacher have transitioned over to this world too.
Yeah. One of the things that I think after the fact that helped me in podcasting is over my career, I'd always led teams and always had to do a lot of hiring, do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of interviewing. And I can't remember what course, but something behavioral interviewing. Tell me a time
Right.
and one
Small
of the
group
things,
dynamics,
yeah,
right? How to ask open-ended questions, all those little
yeah.
things.
And one of the things I learned is tell me about a time. I think we learn more from our failures than we do successes. So I want
Yep.
you to do is tell me about a time when you didn't hit a goal, but it taught you something important. And
Mm,
I realize it may take you a few minutes to come up with an
right.
example. So that's okay. Don't rush. Don't
Yep.
be awkward that there's silence. I can wait. And I would do that because I'm like, no, understand what I really want you to do is something specific. I want you to tell me a specific story. It's okay. You haven't done anything wrong. This is it. And so yeah, I do think that's a really good point, Julie, is having someone giving them time to process and think. I also talk a lot about that when we're bringing in a new teammate, when I
Mm,
remind everyone learns differently.
yep.
In our job, I had a wonderful friend, Doug, who said, if you really know the subject you're teaching, you can teach it any way you want. So what you have
Yep.
to do is figure out your student how they need you to teach it, and then you can change it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important in to you can't just and I do agree that in interviewing, every podcast goes a different way. And sometimes I'll get a guest. I send a pre-form beforehand, but I tell them this is just the start. Just this is
Right.
just an idea for you to think about it. And I always love the people that come back and they send me a document with every answer filled out. And it's so sweet. I don't know, it's okay. And I will tell them I didn't read that because I want to have a conversation. So
Right. And
that's
I do
awesome.
think that the most powerful podcasts especially interview versions, are when it's natural, when you just let it flow. I get people
Yeah.
asking me all the time, what questions are you going to ask? I go, I don't know. We're
Yeah.
going to start here and we'll see where it takes us. That's why people like podcasts, because you feel that connection that's happening between the people, right? It's that storytelling element. But I've met so many women in the last year and a half that have asked me about podcast guesting, and a lot of them are scared to do it because they don't know how to prepare to be interviewed. And so one of the things I'm thinking about creating is like a space where it's, look, I'm going to have an hour this month, you come if you want to practice, and I'll ask you whatever topic, we'll work on it. Because it's natural to me, because first I was taught how to do it as my education, and then I did it in all these different jobs. So that the interview is the least scary part for me. The harder for me is sitting down by myself with the mic and talking, because all the attention's on me.
Yeah.
And I've also had friends who are podcasters who love solo episodes. They're afraid to do guests because they don't know how to prepare to be the interviewer, too. There's
Yeah.
different skills on both sides.
So probably it was right after the pandemic, I think. Maybe before the pandemic, it all the time goes thing. But I was reaching a point, Julie, where I realized if I wasn't careful, this podcast could be nothing but, and I say this with love in my heart, a bunch of old white guys talking about Bruce Springsteen. And hey, I'm an old white guy. And so I specifically started reaching out to on my social media platforms and probes like I am looking for female or gender neutral guests. I'm looking for
Mm-hmm.
people who are new Springsteen guests. Maybe you're a second or third generation. Maybe you've discovered
Right.
Bruce on your own, different ethnic backgrounds, and it makes for and I've had some wonderful guests. In fact, I did a roundtable. I all three of the guests were female. They were all 23 or under, and none of them had ever seen Bruce live because he had
Okay.
not toured since
Right.
they were fans. And we had a great discussion. I'll probably cut this out, but please, if you have someone that says, I'm nervous, say, do you like music? Let me hook you up with
Right.
Jesse and you'll have a blast. So,
So true. And actually, that's what I love about podcasting. I actually created a community for women podcasters because of this. I love connecting people.
yeah,
If I guest on a show and I'm like, oh, I have a friend who'll be perfect for you. But also, sometimes you just have to practice, but it doesn't have to be so serious.
yeah,
The first episode, that first podcast I was ever a guest on, I don't even remember now how I found him to ask to be on it. He's in the UK, and his podcast was about movies.
mm,
And he would give you a list, say, what of these? And I would say, these are some of my top ones. And he'd tell me which one we can focus on. So I was talking about, I love horror films, I love thrillers. So I had a blast talking to this guy about it. I didn't even think about the fact that I was recorded and it went out. But and it wasn't about pets, it wasn't about podcasting. It was just for me to do it about something I love talking about, which is movies. I love movies. And so for me, that was that touch point for me to realize, oh, this is fun. It doesn't have to be scary. And I think that a lot of times I tell people who haven't done it, I go, find something that you think would be fun to do and it's not scary, like music, like this. Like I could easily say, hey, go talk to him. He'll make you feel welcome. Yeah, I think that is really important.
yeah. Why horror films? How did you become a fan of horror films?
That is a very good question, because no one in my family likes them, and my mom always says, I don't know. But again, I had a TV in my room, so they didn't know what I was watching.
Okay.
And I will be honest, it started with Hitchcock. I love Hitchcocks, and I do a wide variety of horror. I'm not a huge slasher, but Halloween is one of my favorite movies. So I don't know what it is. I've always loved it. I still love it. I don't know why, but I don't know if it's the suspense. I like mystery. I like mystery novels, so there's just that aspect of it that I
Yeah.
really enjoy. And I was that person that would go see the new one coming out midnight at the theater and stand in line back when we had to do that. I think there's just things that I have found that are my self-care. Whatever it is you like. I like music in the car. when I drive places, people are like, "Don't you get bored for a 4 hour drive?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I get to be alone. I get to play whatever I want or listen to whatever podcast I want." So as an introvert, I've always found those things that I enjoy, but that I can enjoy alone. And horror films is one of them.
Do you have favorite filmmakers?
One of my favorite movies is Sleepy Hollow by Tim Burton
Okay.
because, first of all, it was back when Johnny Depp was cool.
Yes.
But I love it because it's not also, I've always loved the Sleepy Hollow story. When I was really little, I loved the Disney version of Ichabod Crane that was like a 20-minute. And Bing Crosby was the narrator. So again, tied into my dad. Like I knew who he was. So I've always loved that story. But what I love about that movie, but also movie makers like Tim Burton, is their movie isn't just a story, it's a mood. Like
Yeah.
everything about that, the coloring, the color of the houses, the cloudiness, like the music. I love that kind of where it's all mood. It's all of a certain kind of mood. And I also love, I think it's because I also love fall. I love the weather. I love the cooler weather and the cloudy and the rainy. So it's all just kind of part of that. And I see it too today, like in the Wednesday show on Netflix. It's very similar in that way. So, yeah, I've always just loved it. I don't think I have it like super favorites that I love all of their stuff. It's more of the story. Like for me, one of my other favorite movies is The Mummy, the one in the 90s with Brendan Fraser.
Sure.
So it's just random. I don't know. I am
So
not a typical girl. I did watch rom-coms, but it's not if I want to decompress and hang out, that's not what I like watching. I like watching something with some action, or maybe it's just more of a story that we're trying to figure something out and then there's a resolution.
so what's funny is I do not like horror at all. My one of my early best friends in college handed me a Stephen King's Dead Zone and
Mm.
said, "You need to read this." I don't read horror. Nope, you need to read this. And so therefore I loved it and have grown to like Stephen King. One of my other podcasts is called JKL Media, and
Mm.
it's Jesse, Karen, and Lou. And so Lou, he did a Stephen King podcast, loves horror. And so what we did is we take turns. Like I picked the Little Steven documentary that was on HBO. That's what we watched
Mhm.
to discuss. And Karen picked Barbie once. We're going to talk about Barbie. And we did 12 Monkeys. And so we just all rotate. And Lou said, I really want the Netflix show Midnight Mass. I want to talk
Mm.
about that.
That's a good one. I really like that show.
And he said, I know you don't like horror. So if watch the first episode. And if you're uncomfortable, we'll skip it. And I watched it and I did not know what it was going in. I will
Mm.
not talk about what it is now because I think if you've never seen it, it is really cool the reveal.
Yes.
And I in discussing, I said I was watching a baseball documentary and Lou's like, what? I said, hang on, I'm gonna get there. I said, and they said that there were baseball catchers who could hit. And Johnny Bench was a hitter who could catch. I said,
Mm.
Midnight Mass, there are horror stories that are good stories. Midnight Mass is a great story that happens to be a horror story. And
Absolutely. And I those are the kind that I resonate with because I'm not there to just kill people for the sake of blood
right,
and guts and that I don't resonate with.
yeah,
It is the story. And it's also just I think some of those shows that do it well that when you see a promo or a trailer and then you watch it,
yeah,
there's something unexpected. There's this underlying thing that you don't even realize has been happening for episodes or a whole movie.
yeah,
And that's what I like. And so I think that some of the sci fi thriller horror stuff gives me that.
yeah,
And I totally agree. That's a great example of it, too, that show. That
yeah,
was, I had no idea what it was.
yeah, I didn't. And they were, and then, so the next one we watched is The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is
Yes.
another Mike Flanagan. And I love that. So we are now doing Hill House. And Lou's, we've done this backwards. Hill House was
Yes,
really the first one. He
it
said,
was.
but I think this is, if we had tried to do Hill House first, you would have said, no, it's too
It's
scary. I
more
don't want to watch.
obvious.
Yeah, I'm obvious. And so I have now reached the point where I, if it's Mike Flanagan, I'm like, okay, I'm not a horror guy, but I'm a Mike Flanagan guy. I think I'll try that. That is great. So you're on a long car trip.
Mm.
What is the music that you're throwing on your on your playlist?
I have a couple different playlists for different moods. If I need
Sure.
to upbeat and keep myself awake, it's right now I love a lot of the high energy kind of pop stuff like Chapel Roan and
Yeah.
I've always been a Beyonce fan and Lady Gaga. Like those are the kind of things that I like because I know and it can keep me upbeat. But I also
Sing on,
learning
right?
about yes, yes, especially on my solo car trips. I get to in my previous profession I actually commuted a lot, so some places were anywhere from an hour to 5 hours away from where I lived. So I spent a lot of time in the car, but that was long enough ago. Podcasts weren't as accessible in the cars, so music was my outlet. And
Sure.
so it allowed me to find stuff I like to sing to, but also allowed me to try different things.
Yeah.
So that kind of upbeat stuff I like, but I also like moody stuff. And once in a while, just throw on something from the 80s or the 90s. It's funny because going through your list of questions, I was thinking I've always been a big No Doubt fan.
Yeah.
And sometimes I forget like how many great albums and songs a band like that has had. And that is a band that I've seen. I saw No Doubt twice and I saw Gwen Stefani solo twice.
Okay.
I guess that's one of my favorites.
Okay.
And another great story is growing up in Southern California, we some of us get the benefit of getting to go to Disneyland a lot.
Right.
And in the spring, Disneyland does something that's called grad night. So the night I graduated from high school, when the ceremony was over and we'd done the pictures and stuff, there were buses waiting for us if we'd signed up to get on a bus right after graduation and drive to Disneyland. And then we got to hang out in Disneyland all night and
Okay.
till the early morning. And there's a little space, it's probably different now. Back then in the 90s in Tomorrowland, where it's like a band where people can have bands set up to play and people are on. No Doubt played the night we were there. And it was right before they hit big and before Just a Girl came out. There's a reason they're a favorite band of mine for the nostalgia and experience, but I also just love their music. And they're a great example of blending different styles, ska and reggae, as well as pop and a little bit of grunge. So, yeah, that's one that I started thinking about for this that I was like, God, I have some great memories with them at experiences. And also I had a lot of friends that loved it. Like I remember being in the car with friends and we were scream singing till I'm Just a Girl because it was like an anthem for us girls in the 90s.
Sure. That's great. I'm wondering if you don't mind. So you've decided to go podcasting. Talk to me. Why pets? Why did you decide to do that?
I've always been a pet person. Growing up, I didn't gravitate to babies. I gravitated to dogs and cats.
Okay.
I always say 5-year-old Julie wanted to be one of two things, a veterinarian or an accountant.
Okay.
And so I think that's the two sides of me, the math, the analytical, but then there's
Yeah.
also the like softer. And we talked about it earlier on about choosing something you like to talk about, you can talk about.
Yeah.
Like I always say, pets is something no matter who it is or where I am, I could talk about for hours, any different way.
Yeah.
My own, theirs, different
Sure.
topics. So that's really, I think, what made me use that as a start. And then I started meeting all these other amazing pet people, pet parents. For me, as a woman, I have no human kids. That was not my path. And I realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of other women out there that
Sure.
use their mothering for pets, but also to help animals in other ways. So it opened up a whole new world and a whole new community for myself in an area that I've always loved. And I've always considered myself an animal advocate at a very young age. I learned about where meat comes from and where certain products come from, and I followed PETA, a lot of that. But I realized with my podcast, I started interviewing people who actually work and do those types of things, and I realized I knew a very small piece of it. So for me, it's been a place that not only do I get to talk about pets, which I love, but I'm also learning. And then I realized, wait, if I'm learning and I thought I knew stuff, there's a lot of people that don't know any of this. So
Sure.
I think my love of pets has started it, but now my love of educating people, again, that teacher thing, but I'm also giving a platform for people who are on the front line, seeing the worst of human behavior in terms of what people will do to animals. And
Yeah.
so that also keeps me going because I know I've experienced now how important it is to share that, no matter what your topic of passion is, women's rights, men's rights,
Yeah.
LGBTQ, pets, animals, whatever your passion is, podcasting allows you to talk about it, grow in it, and also help other people to learn.
Hmm.
And so that's really what started it and has kept me going. And so then my other podcast is more about women and women's stories and getting more women's voices in podcasting. So I really enjoy learning and trying new things. But then I also really enjoy responding to what people want me to talk about.
Yeah.
I need you to talk about this because I don't know how to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
So I really that community and reciprocal relationship that we get to have as podcasters. And honestly, without the community I have found in podcasting, I wouldn't still be doing it. That's
Yeah.
made all the difference.
Why, and this is, I, it's easy to do a generalization, but why do you think some women have trouble telling their story?
Because for a lot of us, myself included, there were dynamics at some point in their life, whether it was at home or at school or just society in general, that we were told different things about how a woman should behave, how a woman should speak, or when a woman should or should not speak. And so, what I have found, every woman I've met within podcasting, starting a podcast has changed their life in some way. And it's because they're finding their voice. They're finding their people. They're finding their community. They're finding their passion, whatever it is. I have friends who have podcasts about sustainability, about being a widow, about art, about speaking. There's just so many variety. But I do think that women, myself included, my sister will probably not listen to this podcast, so I can say my older sister was always very dramatic, very emotional, very reactive. And so I saw that in her and I didn't want to do it. So I went the other way.
Yeah.
And I also felt it was like with my parents, we have a lot to handle. Can you just be quiet and stay over there? Because they knew I
Yeah.
was a good girl, did all the things I was supposed to. A lot of it, I've had to break out of that and realize that to be authentically me is not to be quiet, is not to be afraid to share, is not to be afraid to reshare something on social because people are not going to agree with me. So for me, it's been like an evolution of helping myself to just come out of my shell. And also in higher education, we had to act a certain way. We couldn't talk about some things. It was different. We had dress codes, we had curriculum, we had to meet certain standards. So being able to start my own business and then podcasting has made me realize, wow, I can be whatever I want. And there are people who actually want to hear my story and hear me talk about things.
My, I can remember when I was dating my wife, and she won't hear this, nor will her sister, though, that her sister was the good daughter and my wife was the bad daughter. One of my favorite stories is Mary and Linda were both in high school at a party, both drunk, drinking underage. And then Sunday morning, Linda's sleeping in and Mary's up
Right.
bright and early. Oh, you should saw Linda last night. She was crazy, right?
Yep.
And so when Mary went away to college, Linda was going to local college. All of a sudden, she filled in the role as the good daughter because,
Mm.
and then when Mary would come to visit, she would almost without thinking fall into that pattern. So I can absolutely see that it's the you
We
can you
have different roles in different places.
yes.
And I can remember times like when my mom went with me to hear my doctoral dissertation defending.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh my God, I had no idea you could do that." I'm like, "Yeah, because you know me in this box." And even when I'm with my dad passed, but even when I'm with my mom and my sister, she's still the star of the show. She has to be the one that talks the most, all
Yeah.
of that. And so I become in the back. That's just the dynamic of my family. But I've been able to have experiences with my mom where she has able over my adulthood to learn more about me in other ways. Even when I got married and I was so organized doing all this stuff, and I remember my mom making a comment, and my friend was like, "What are you talking about? This is how she is in college. Why wouldn't she be?" But they didn't know me in that
Yeah.
setting. So yeah, I think what podcasting gives a lot of us, especially women, is a place to be themselves, not restricted by their career, their family, whatever. And we're able to just say what we want to say and express how we feel and be able to put it out. And I've also realized that storytelling and podcasting is healing because it's like you're releasing whatever experience you're talking about. So if it's negative, it's great. Okay, I can put it there. But it also is great because, like this, I've thought about stuff from my childhood I haven't thought about in years. It's made me think about experiences with my dad, who I lost 7 years ago. So storytelling is so powerful, and that audio only, you're in someone's ear, like you can't buy that kind of connection.
Yeah. And I sent a really over almost 3 years ago, my mom had a very bad stroke and
Mm.
she died last summer, but she was, so I was having to go to Louisiana to see her either in the hospital or the nursing home. And I discovered the Story Song podcast on
Mm.
that Pantheon network, which I was not part of at the time, I am now. And it was three people, two guys and a gal, that had been friends since elementary school. And they would take a story song and break it apart lyric by lyric and have fun with it. Just, and it was hilarious. And I sent them an email saying that I just had you guys on. I pulled up all your old ones and was just listening because I didn't feel like listening to music. I wanted my mind off of it because I was driving down. I was worried about
Right.
my mom, worried about everything. And you guys just brought me joy. You brought me joy, and I didn't think about it for a little bit. And I think that's the gift we do. When
Yep.
people talk to me about joining, on Set Lusting Bruce, I'll say, if it's good, what I want us to do is feel like you're eavesdropping on a conversation in the line ahead of you, waiting to go to a Bruce show. You're
I
just
love that.
eavesdropping, right? You're hearing two friends either talk about Bruce or talk about No Doubt or just talk about things. And that's when it's good that you
Yep.
just enjoy that. Yeah, I think and I know that I've seen my wife, she found it through sport. She started doing 5Ks and half
Mm.
marathons and marathons, and she found her voice by doing that. And
Right.
she always jokes that when I'm not with you and Chris as our adult son, I'm the funny one. Like, you may
Right.
not believe I'm the funny one. And I'm like, yes, I do believe you would be the funny one.
It
And she's,
it's
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it's so true. I think we all find places where we get to be a little more of something we want to be, but we can't in other
Yeah.
ways. But I also hear you talk about that. You had something to listen to go see your mom. A lot of podcasting and storytelling in any format is about legacy. It's about
Yes.
our experience and sharing it so it's still there.
Yes.
And having lost a parent like you, my dad hand wrote some of his life story. He was in World War II.
Yeah.
He has a lot of crazy experiences, a lot of which he didn't talk about when I was little because he didn't want people to know how big of an age difference there was between him and my mom. And luckily, he looked way younger than he was. But now, thank God we have that because not only do we have the story of him and his family, but we have the physical, his handwriting and the way he spoke and how he wrote it out. And that's what I've realized. So many of us come to storytelling as a podcaster or video or whatever because it is about leaving a mark on the world or having our story heard by someone, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's about music we love or pets we love or some topic we have a passionate about.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. And I never expected that. I think people come into podcasting for so many different reasons. And even though I do it as a business, a lot of what I love is this.
Yeah.
I don't love editing and doing all the things and putting it all the places, but I love interviews, whether I'm the interviewer or the interviewee, because I have met so many incredible people all over the world that I know I would have never met if I hadn't started a podcast.
Julie, I get asked that fairly often. Are you ever tired, Jesse? September will be 10 years I've been doing set listing Bruce.
Wow.
And I
And
go,
that is a huge accomplishment. People
thank
have
you.
no idea how hard it is to keep it going, and
Yeah.
also just to keep going in a world that's always changing.
Yeah. And I go, yeah, I get tired of trying to do schedules, and then I get tired of editing and doing that, and then okay, uploading it and then remembering to promote it and remembering to send to the Met, because I always try to keep 3, 4 weeks in advance. So I got to remember, got to email Julie that, okay, your podcast that you talked about 6 weeks ago, it's finally out. But,
Right.
and you've had a full day at my day gig, and I get home and my butt's dragging. But the moment that Zoom opens and I see my guest's face and we start talking, it all goes away. And I
Yep.
go, this is why I do it. This is why I love it.
Absolutely. Time and problems and all that kind of disappears, even if you're talking about a hard subject.
Yeah.
I've noticed lately that loss and grief comes up a lot in my conversations, no matter
Yeah.
what the topic is we started. Everyone has something. Everyone's dealing with something, whether it's loss of a job or loss of a person or loss of a pet or just the world itself. But when we're here, it's like it's just you and me. All of that kind of goes away,
Yeah.
fades away. I'm not worried about my bills or what I got to do tomorrow. We're just here connecting over something that's shared. And yeah, there's so much power in it. And I know a lot of us in podcasting, that is what keeps us going. It's not the money or the downloads or whatever.
Yeah.
It's that connection. And we want to keep feeling it and keep also sharing it.
Yeah. I always tell I would love to get more downloads just because I think there are stories I'm sharing that I think more people should hear. But
Yep.
I, and then I probably will cut this out because now you and I are just talking. We're no longer being an interview. A couple of weeks ago, Jessie Lou from the UK and her partner did a podcast, Because the Boss Belongs to Us. Is Bruce
Hmm.
Springsteen a queer icon? And it was they actually did it as if they were doing their doctorate, that they came up with, here are the criterias that if
Hmm.
he's going to be a queer icon, each criteria was a different episode. They did research, and then their last episode was they got a panel of people, of queer people that were not Bruce Springsteen fans, and they presented their case to see, would you vote
Oh,
yay or nay? Fascinating episode.
I
Fascinating
love that.
discussion. I loved the whole episode. So I was able to interview Jessie, and they were a great guest. And I was like, this is important because the idea, and their point was, he's a cis white rich male. How in the world could that in any fashion be? But he is. He is.
Right.
And they went through the reasons why. And then the one you talked about, grief, this was a couple of years now, but I heard that Sarah had a story to tell, and a friend of a friend sent me, and I reached out to her, and she goes, I don't know if I'm going to be comfortable talking about it. I said, well, let's just try. And I will send you this one. I'm really proud of this one. Her grandmother was murdered by a friend of the family. And it was just devastating. It devastated her grandfather. She ended up having to move in with her grandfather. The grief was just horrible. She self-medicated, self-abused, just drugs, alcohol, just a horrible, making horrible decisions. And she hits rock bottom and decides to make the decision to become sober. And she did, but she told her sober coach, she told her AA sponsor, I will never forgive him, though. That's the line I won't cross. And she's driving home, and Bruce's song "Letter to You" came out. And that was an
Mm.
album that it was the end of came out end of 2020,
Oh, yeah.
and it struck her. And she went home, she pulled paper, and she started writing to this man that killed her grandmother,
Mm.
who was in he was waiting to be he was in death row. And she just wrote this letter pouring out everything, sealed it in an envelope, mailed it. And after a while, a return letter came back.
Mm.
And she said she was scared to open it. And her husband finally, okay, I'll open it. And he said, it's okay for you to read this. So, cut to the story, they end up becoming pen pals.
Oh, my goodness.
And she forgives him.
Mm.
His family had disowned him. And they said, if you can forgive him, we can forgive him. And so he
Wow.
was able to connect with his family. And the day he was executed, she was there the day before with his family, spending time together. And it is like the movie where she says, look at me when you're dying
Mm.
because you know someone will love you.
I literally have chills.
Yes. And I'm like, the story that sharing, and she now has changed her. She is going to school, and her new passion will be fighting to end the death penalty. Yeah. And
And so much of people's passions often come from a struggle or a loss or
yeah,
something like that. And there's just, you can't replicate that if you
no.
tried.
And that music, and when a few people I know were like, Bruce needs to hear this story. I mean, just Bruce
Right.
needs to hear this story, that music. And so I was able to get her on a couple other podcasts. I was like, this is an important story. This is a
Right.
story about forgiveness. This is a story about the power of music and the power of love.
Yep.
I agree with you. And Julie, the thing that, and I will clean up a lot of this crap. Uh,
It's okay.
yeah, I get angry at a lot of people who cannot even acknowledge that people have a different experience than them.
Right.
A 55-year-old white guy that was born middle class that's did this has a different experience than an African American young
Right.
man. A woman who is raised in that with this thing. And what do you mean women need voices? Just you don't understand.
Yep.
There is that built in where a woman's called a bitch and a
Yep.
guy's called powerful. Oh, he's a
Right.
leader. She's a bitch.
I think this has come up for me in a couple of interviews I've done lately where we talk about how much the world lacks empathy or compassion, and why a lot of the
Yeah.
issues we have, because people cannot put down their own ego, their own thoughts, their own beliefs, and understand someone else's perspective, or say, I can't imagine what that was like for you,
Yeah.
because we've lost that in a lot of places. And I think again, that's why we come to podcasting, because oh, you get it. You
Yes.
understand. And one of the things I say a lot is I do not have human kids. I have never birthed a child. I am not a mom. I am never going to speak to a mom's experience. I can speak to my version of a
Right.
mom's experience of mothering. I'm a proud auntie. I'm a proud pet parent,
Yeah.
sister, daughter, all those things. And a lot of people have a hard time saying they aren't that, or they don't
Yeah.
want to speak to it because it's not their experience. They just like, that's what social media is built on, us telling other people what they're doing wrong. I would never go
Yes.
in there and say you're raising your child wrong. I have no right to do that, in my opinion. So I totally get what you're saying, because
Yes.
I think, and I also think that even though video is so popular right now, the audio only podcast is very powerful because it drops everything. You can't see what they look like. You can't see how old they are, what color their skin is.
Yeah.
It's just a voice, and you're connected to them in that way. And that
And
is a lot of how we connect with music.
and so many of us will listen to a podcast either when we're alone in a car or with some kind of headphone. So there
Mm-hmm.
is this intimacy and that is why I think a lot what makes a podcast successful is I want to hang out with these people. If I don't want to hang out with these people, maybe I won't want to listen to this podcast. And that's on
Right.
me, not them. And I was at my last Bruce show was in Columbus, Ohio in the beginning of 24. And there was a meetup beforehand and a bunch of Bruce Springsteen fans. And I 4 or 5 people, maybe even more, but 4 or 5 people specifically. Are you Jesse? Yes. I don't want to bother you, but I just want to tell you how much I love Set Listing Bruce. First off, never a bother. Trust me. It is doing a podcast is lonely.
Yeah, it's like I want to walk around with the sign that says, "Yes, please ask me about my podcast."
Yes, please.
That's why I love podcast conferences because I've had those
Yeah.
things where I'll walk up to someone, "Oh yeah, I follow you." I'm like, "What do you mean you follow me?"
Yes, exactly. What do you want to do in your podcast that you haven't done yet?
Consistency is something I've struggled with.
Yeah.
I have really unrealistic expectations of what I can get done within.
Okay.
So that is something, especially with my second, that I really want to come back and really do it. I'm sitting on a ton of content. I think I've just had a hard time moving past whatever block I was having.
Okay.
But also, I want to open people's minds. I want people
Yeah.
to experience new things. And I see that with my pet podcasts, just myself. Since
Yeah.
starting that, I volunteered at my shelter. I fostered. I even worked part time at one of the shelters doing adoption events. When I
Nice.
say podcasting changed my life, it did in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And so I want to do that for other people, whether it's helping someone start one, helping someone be a guest and share that important story they have, or maybe they're going to adopt instead of buy.
Yeah.
Those are the little things that keep me going, but also I wanted to get more of.
Okay.
And I've also realized there's a lot of people that don't realize they have a story to tell and that someone needs to hear it.
Julie, I get that all the time. Oh, Jesse, I said
I don't have anything to say.
every Bruce Springsteen fan has a story.
Right.
Everyone has a story. I said,
Yep.
and it is my goal, it is my passion to get as many of them I can on tape as possible, even though we don't use tape
You know,
recording.
one of the examples of stories I tell when people say stuff like that is I have a friend who I met through podcasting. We were in a podcaster membership thing where we were learning new things. She had a podcast about being a widow. The title of which is Love is Not Dead, Just My Husband.
Ah,
So it
I
tells you a
love
little
that.
bit about her and her
Oh, that's
personality.
awesome.
And her whole podcast is her. She did not do interviews. It's basically a journal. She lost her husband with no warning, and 6 weeks after that, she was diagnosed with a rare cancer and
Mm,
lost one of her eyes to the tumor. And so I met her years after that. She didn't do her
yeah,
podcast till at least a couple of years, and she was just so inspiring to me. The way she would just get on there and just talk about it, and just put it all on the table. But she was also a great storyteller. Her voice, her comedy, she lived with humor. And I was very proud to call her my friend. And we signed up for PodFest 2025 to be on a panel about storytelling with a couple other podcasters. And
nice.
the day we found out we were accepted, we found out she had passed away. The
Oh,
cancer had come back, had metastasized. She'd went through many treatments. We had been told by her about a week or so earlier that she was at the point where they said we can't do anything else. It's too far. And she was telling us she was going to be in hospice and she was still going to make it to Podfest. And then she just declined rapidly. And we were all just kind of left with, what do you mean? Like, she was the one that was going to make it. She was the
yeah,
one that was going to beat it. She just was this presence, this person. Everybody she met felt like a BFF. Like, she had an incredible way of connecting. And I struggled really hard. And I'm like, why am I so impacted by this? Yes, I knew her, but I barely knew her. I met her once in person. Like, I struggled with why I was so connected. But I listened to her podcast. I'm not a widow. I've never had cancer, but it still impacted me and pushed me to share stories I haven't shared. And so this past January, we did the panel and we did it to honor her. We talked about our own experiences, but we also told everyone why we were there and what had happened. And that is the power of storytelling and podcasting. And our both of us had the same coach in that community, and she has worked out with Buzzsprout to pay per year to keep her podcast on and to so people can listen. She recorded the last episode because Rebecca passed so quickly, and she asked several of us that knew her well to record a snippet of how she'd impacted us. And I cried through that entire episode. It was very hard to listen to,
Yeah.
but like it also made me realize how much this has impacted me personally. And then I found these friends that like I've made some of the deepest friendships with people I barely have met in person. So Podfest has become our family reunion every
Sure.
year to get to see each other. But I share that not to make people feel bad or sad. Everybody's got something. But she's just such an example of no matter all the stuff she dealt with, and she had it rough. She had a lot. She still put herself out there. She still found the humor. She did that for us. Like we all were sad, and she'd be like, "Get over it. I'm okay."
Yeah.
And it also connected us to some of her family, and we were able to say, "You don't understand how impacted she made people that they never maybe even saw." She had a son, and we're like, "You need to know what she has done and what she's put out into the world." That's what a lot of times, and I know several of my friends will say, Rebecca would give anything to be here recording another episode and talking to people. And we have to use that to keep us going. We may never hear from people that say, "Oh, you touched me, you inspired me," but
Yeah.
you just have to realize there is somebody out there that needs to hear it, and they're going to find you in some way, and that's really what it's all about.
That is well said, perfectly said. I was going to ask you if you had any final words before I went to the Mary question, and you just are, you're a pro, I can tell. So I am going to let you give some last minutes and how to reach you, but I end every podcast with what I call the Mary question. Jay
Yes.
Armstrong was on the podcast like one of my first years, and he was a high school English teacher at the time. He's now retired. But when he was teaching, he would give his students the lyrics to Bruce Springsteen's song Thunder Road. And they would read it as if it was a poem discussing the themes and the imagery that Bruce explores in that song. And then he would ask his class at the end of the school, there, does Mary get in the car? So that is your question. Do you think Mary gets in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
So I listened. I'll be honest, when you say Thunder Road, I'm like, I can't picture that. Like Bruce
Yeah,
Springsteen to me is the Americana flag and Courtney Cox dancing on his stage in the
sure,
music videos. Like that's
sure.
so I listened and I listened with the lyrics so I could really hear the words. And the last lyric that says, "Town full of losers, I'm pulling out of here to win." That win part is what made me decide she gets in the car.
Okay. You think
That
so?
it was like we got to leave all this behind and become who we really are, and we can do it together and we can support each other. That's what I felt. And again, I'm a visual person. In my head oftentimes if I'm reading or anything, the image comes in and I could just see even myself at that age. Yeah, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah,
Right.
perfect. Yeah, great. All right. So, Julie, first off, where can they find your podcast? And if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
Both of my podcasts are everywhere you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, all the places. The Story of My Pet, it is, you can find it, the story of my pet podcast.com. And I have a YouTube channel, Julie Marty-Pearson, which is where both my podcasts live. And my website, juliemartypearson.com, is where you can find all of my free workshops, my networking community for women podcasters, as well as listen to my other podcasts. I am in the process of relaunching and I'm very excited about it. So look up The Story of My Pet, look up Podcast Your Story Now, and you will find me everywhere pretty much.
That sounds great. Any final thoughts before I let you go?
I just want to say I love this. It's one of those things when I read it again after I said yes, I'm like, wait, why am I doing this? I'm not really a Bruce Springsteen fan.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the 80s and childhood, but I just really love how you frame it and how you frame it. Yes, if you're a Bruce fan, but if you're not, insert your favorite. And so that's where all my no doubt stories came from. And I really love what you're doing. So I can see why people connect with you and you've been able to keep this going for so long. So thank you for having me.
This is a joy, and I hope we can do it again sometime. So
Absolutely.
keep up the great work. All right, listeners, go check out the podcast. Reach out. We all have pet stories. And for now, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.